Captain Morgan Hayes stood at the grimy viewport of Docking Bay E-17, watching another potential buyer walk away from the GSV Tenacity. Their antennae had drooped the moment they'd seen the ship's hull, all angular plates and reinforced mining struts, looking more like a scrap-yard refugee than a functioning vessel. The 17th rejection. This month stung worse than the others. Final call for auction lot 2187. The station's AI announced in 12 different languages. Human-built deep space hauler. Class B mining configuration. Minimal reserve price. Morgan pressed her forehead against the cool glass, fighting back a wave of frustration. The Centauri trade hub buzzed with activity around her dead ship. Sleek corvettes from the Proxima colonies glided past like silver needles, while massive hive ships of the Meridian Collective dwarfed everything with their crystalline bulk. Every species had their own aesthetic, their own philosophy of space travel. The problem was, nobody wanted human philosophy anymore. Getting sentimental over that heap again, Captain. The raspy voice belonged to Docking Master 66, his chitinous frame casting multiple shadows under the hub's artificial day cycle. Fees are due in 48 hours. After that, well, his mandibles clicked in what passed for sympathy among his kind. She's not dead yet, Morgan said, more to herself than to him. The Tenacity had been her home for 7 years, ever since she'd left the Earth Defense Force with a chip on her shoulder and dreams of making it big in the independent trade routes. The ship had been outdated even then, but the price had been right, and something about its stubborn, over-engineered design had called to her. She made her way down to the docking tube, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal grating. The ship's access hatch recognized her biometrics, cycling open with a hiss of recycled air. Inside, the corridors were dark to save power, emergency lighting casting everything in a soft blue glow. "Home sweet home," she muttered, running her hand along the textured wall. The interior was pure human engineering. Redundant systems, manual overrides for everything, and more repair access panels than any modern ship would need. The aliens called it primitive, but Morgan called it reliable. The bridge was a symphony of quiet beeps and status lights. She settled into the captain's chair, its worn padding conforming to her shape. The main console lit up at her touch, displaying the ship's current status. Life support was running at minimal power, the cargo holds were empty, and the quantum crystalline core. Morgan frowned, tapping the readout. The core's power signature had changed again. The experimental engine technology had been the Tenacity's one cutting-edge feature when it was built, but nobody had ever figured out how to make it work properly. Most days, it just hummed along like any other power plant, but sometimes, like now, it would show these strange energy patterns. "What are you trying to tell me, old girl?" she asked the empty bridge. The redouts flickered, almost like a response, then settled back to their normal parameters. Morgan had learned to stop mentioning these occurrences to potential buyers. They already thought human ships were unreliable, without adding mysterious power fluctuations to the mix. A priority alert flashed across her console. Another missing ship report along the Orion Cygnus route. The third this week. Modern vessels, top-of-the-line crews, just vanishing without a trace. The Galactic Council was offering substantial rewards for any information, but no one seemed eager to investigate too closely. Morgan's eyes drifted to the mounting maintenance bills on her secondary screen, then back to the alert. The Tenacity might be considered obsolete by modern standards, but her heavy mining hull could take a beating, and that quantum crystalline core, for all its quirks, had never failed her. "Computer," she said, sitting up straighter, "draft a response to the Council's investigation contract. Tell them." She allowed herself a small smile. "Tell them we're available for immediate deployment." The console chirped an acknowledgement, but Morgan could have sworn the lights brightened just a fraction, as if the ship itself approved of her decision. Maybe it was time to stop running from the Tenacity's peculiarities and start using them to her advantage. After all, sometimes the best solutions came from the most unlikely places. And if they were going to end up as scrap anyway, they might as well go out doing something that mattered. The Galactic Council chamber loomed before Morgan, like a cathedral built of light and living metal. Holographic displays flickered between the towering pillars, each one showing another missing ship's last known coordinates. She felt small standing there in her worn EDF dress uniform, the only human among the gathered representatives. Captain Hayes of the GSV Tenacity. The Chief Counselor's translation matrix rendered their multiple-tone voice into standard English. Your vessel's specifications fall well below our minimal requirements for this operation. The Orion Cygnus route has claimed 12 advanced ships in the past month alone. Morgan kept her spine straight, even as she felt the dismissive glances from the other ship captains in attendance. With all due respect, Counselor, those advanced ships are the ones going missing. Maybe it's time to try something different. A ripple of bioluminescent chatter passed through the gathered aliens. The Chief Counselor's upper eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of either amusement or indigestion. Morgan could never tell which. Your courage is noted, Captain, but we cannot risk. You're not risking anything. Morgan cut in, earning several gasps from the more ceremonial species present. My ship, my crew, my risk. And if we succeed, you get valuable intelligence. If we fail, she shrugged, you're no worse off than you are now. The council chamber fell silent save for the soft hum of environmental systems. Morgan could feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air, heavy as a neutron star. Very well. The Chief Counselor finally said, your contract is approved, but you'll need a full crew complement before departure. Morgan allowed herself a small smile. Already handled, Counselor. 2 hours later, she stood in the Tenacity's cargo bay, facing what had to be the most unusual crew ever assembled under human command. First Officer Jack Lorenzo was the only other human, the former EDF engineer who'd been discharged for hearing machines talk. He stood with his arms crossed, a maze of circuit-like tattoos visible below his rolled-up sleeves. Morgan had seen him work. If he was crazy, his insanity had an uncanny way of fixing impossible problems. Beside him towered Kavul, a Meridian navigator who'd been exiled for questioning their species' rigid approach to spatial mathematics. Their crystalline form caught the bay's lights, refracting them into complex patterns that seemed to dance across the deck. And then there was Echo, a synthetic being who'd escaped from a corporate research lab. They appeared almost human, save for the subtle metallic sheen of their skin and eyes that shifted color with their processing load. They'd been living in the station's maintenance ducts, trading computer repairs for power cells until Morgan had found them. This is everyone. Kivall's translator rendered their harmonic speech into words. A minimal crew for such a dangerous mission. We're not minimal, Morgan said, leading them toward the bridge. We're efficient. Every person here has skills the others don't. And more importantly, we've all got something to prove. The ship's corridors seemed different now, more alive with the sound of multiple footsteps echoing through them. As they reached the bridge, the quantum crystalline core's hum changed pitch, almost like it was greeting the new arrivals. She likes us, Jack said, pressing his hand against a wall panel. His eyes unfocused slightly, the way they did when he was listening to machinery. The ship, she's happy not to be alone anymore. Morgan would have dismissed such talk once, but after years with the Tenacity, she'd learned to trust her engineer's hunches. Then let's not keep her waiting. Echo, start pre-flight diagnostics. Kivall, plot us a course through the last known coordinates of the missing ships. Jack. She paused, seeing him already deep in communion with the engine systems. Just keep listening. As the crew settled into their stations, Morgan took her place in the captain's chair. The console lit up under her touch, displays springing to life with an eagerness she'd never noticed before. Maybe it was her imagination, but the whole ship felt different. Not just a collection of parts anymore, but something awakening. Tenacity, she said, tasting the name's new meaning. Let's show them what a human ship can do. All sensors show normal space. Caval announced, their crystalline form glowing with frustrated energy. Yet another empty sector. Morgan studied the main display, where the last known position of the luxury liner Star Duchess blinked steadily. They'd been searching for 3 days, following the breadcrumb trail of disappeared ships, and had found nothing but normal space and background radiation. Echo, run another broad-spectrum scan, she ordered, but the synthetic being was already shaking their head. Standard sensors detect no anomalies, Captain. Whatever caused these disappearances leaves no conventional trace. Echo's eyes shifted to a deep purple, indicating deep analysis mode. However, I am detecting an unusual power fluctuation from our core. Jack Lorenzo's head snapped up from his engineering station. You feel it too. The songs changed. His fingers traced the circuit like tattoos on his arms unconsciously. The ship's trying to tell us something. Morgan had learned to trust her engineer's intuition, no matter how strange it sounded. Show me. Jack's hands flew over his console, bringing up the quantum crystalline core's output readings. The usually steady energy wave had transformed into a complex pattern that seemed to pulse in time with something. It's beautiful, Caval whispered, their own crystalline structure resonating slightly. These patterns, they're like ancient meridian space songs, but far more complex. Echo moved to a secondary station, their metallic fingers dancing across the controls, attempting to correlate the core's output with local space-time variables. Captain, I believe. The ship shuddered. Contact. Caval's voice rang out. Multiple spatial distortions forming. Everywhere. How did we not see them before? The main display transformed as new sensor data poured in. The empty space around them was anything but complex geometric patterns folded through reality itself, creating a web of spatial distortions that their normal sensors had completely missed. The core, Jack said, his voice distant, as if in a trance. She's not just detecting them, she's resonating with them. These patterns, they're like machine code written into spacetime itself. Morgan watched as the patterns shifted and flowed around them. Can you decode it? Jack's eyes widened. Captain, it's already been decoded. The quantum crystalline matrix, it's the same technology. Whoever built these space-time traps used the same basic principles as our core. Echo's eyes flashed bright silver. That would explain why modern ships cannot detect them. Their sensors are too advanced, too filtered. They see right through the distortions because they're looking for the wrong things. Like looking for radio waves with a quantum telescope, Morgan muttered. All this time, our obsolete technology was exactly what we needed. She straightened in her chair. Jack, can you use the core to map these distortions? Better than that, he said, still deep in his machine trance. I can show you where they lead. The main display shifted again as Jack fed the core's data through the ship's visualization systems. A clear path appeared through the maze of distortions, a safe route that would have been invisible to any modern navigation system. It's a test, Caval said suddenly, their crystal body humming with excitement. These aren't random traps. They're a filter, letting through only ships that can understanding the old ways. Morgan felt his smile spread across her face. And we just passed the first round. Echo, record everything. Caval, plot a course along that path. Jack. She looked at her engineer, who was still swaying slightly to music only he could hear. Keep communing with our girl. Looks like you two have a lot to talk about. As the Tenacity moved forward through the invisible maze, Morgan could have sworn she felt a new awareness in the ship's movements, like it was no longer just following their commands, but actively participating in its own journey. They had found something far more important than missing ships. They had found proof that sometimes the old ways, the human ways, still had something to teach the galaxy. And the Tenacity, the ship no one had wanted, was about to show them all just how much more there was to learn. 3 more corporate ships requesting escort through the anomaly zone. Echo reported, their eyes cycling through shades of blue as they processed the incoming transmissions. That makes 27 in Q. Morgan rubbed her temples, studying the growing list of contracts on her display. 2 weeks since their discovery, and the Tenacity had gone from worthless to the most sought-after ship in the sector. Every major corporation wanted their valuable cargo shepherded through the spatial maze they'd found. Universal Dynamics is offering triple the standard rate. Caval added, their crystalline form casting rainbow refractions across the bridge. They claim their shipment is time-sensitive. They're all time-sensitive, Morgan muttered. She was about to respond when Jack's voice cut through the bridge's background hum. Captain. Her engineer's voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. We've got company. 3 ships just dropped out of FTL, running silent. The main display shifted to show 3 black shapes against the star field. No transponders, no registration signals, pirates or corporate raiders. It made little difference. They're trying to box us in, Echo observed, their skin taking on a metallic sheen as combat protocols activated, using the spatial distortions to limit our escape routes. Morgan's hands tightened on her armrests. They think they know where the safe paths are. Caval, how close are they to the actual routes? The navigator's crystal structure pulsed with calculation. Their approach vectors are based on observed traffic patterns. They don't actually see the distortions. A smile spread across Morgan's face. Perfect. Jack, how's our girl feeling today? Her engineer had his eyes closed, one hand pressed against his console. She's ready, Captain. The core's running hot, but different than before. Those new modifications we found last week, they're spreading. The modifications had started as small changes. Power conduits rerouting themselves, hull plates showing strange patterns under certain lights. The quantum crystalline technology was growing, evolving, and taking the ship with it. Echo, send out a distress call, Morgan ordered. Make it look like we're panicking. Message sent. They're moving to intercept. Caval, plot us a course straight through that dense cluster of distortions at Mark 37. The navigator's crystalline surface rippled with concern. Captain, those patterns are highly unstable, even with our ability to see them. Trust the ship, Jack interrupted, his circuit tattoos seeming to pulse in time with the core's hum. She knows what she's doing. Morgan nodded. Take us in. The Tenacity surged forward, its obsolete engines pushing it straight toward what looked like empty space to everyone else. The pursuing ships followed, their superior drives quickly closing the gap. They're charging weapons, Echo reported calmly. Let them, Morgan said. Jack, tell me when. The space around them began to twist as they entered the field of distortions. On the display, the pursuing ships started to show signs of confusion, their formation wavering as their sensors failed to navigate the invisible maze. Now, Jack called out. Morgan's orders came fast. Caval, full stop. Echo, reverse power signature. The Tenacity shuddered as it came to a dead stop, the core's energy suddenly pulling inward instead of pushing out. Around them, the spatial distortions responded like a plucked web, rippling outward with their ship at the center. The effect on their pursuers was spectacular. Without the ability to see the distortions, they plowed straight into a maze of folded spacetime. Their ships spun and twisted, caught in geometric patterns they couldn't perceive, reading multiple system failures on all 3 vessels. Echo announced. "Their engines are dead. Life support stable. Send a message to station security," Morgan said, unable to keep the satisfaction from her voice. "Tell them where to find some stranded raiders." As they watched the disabled ships drift, Jack made a strange sound. Morgan turned to find him staring at his console with wide eyes. "Captain," he said slowly, "you need to see this." The display showed the Tenacity's external hull, where the quantum crystalline modifications had once been subtle patterns. Now entire sections glowed with internal light. The ship's surface seemed to ripple, as if the metal itself was becoming something new. "She protected us," Jack whispered. "But more than that, she's learning, growing. This is just the beginning." Morgan looked at her crew, the exile, the synthetic, the machine whisperer, all watching the changes with a mix of wonder and uncertainty. They had started this journey looking for missing ships, but they were finding something far more revolutionary. The ship no one wanted was becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. And they were along for the ride. The massive shape emerged from the spatial distortions, like a leviathan rising from deep waters. Its hull gleamed with an otherworldly light, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mathematics. "Ancient defense platform," Caval announced, their crystalline form vibrating with tension. "At least 20 times our size." Morgan stared at the construct through the Tenacity's main display. After a month of following the quantum trails, they'd finally found the source of the disappearances. A fully automated guardian left behind by the same civilization that had created the spatial maze. Multiple weapon systems activating, Echo reported, their metallic skin reflecting the red alert lights. "Energy signatures unlike anything in my database." "Jack?" Morgan called out, but her engineer was already deep in communion with the ship's systems, his circuit tattoos glowing with the same strange light that now pulsed through the Tenacity's quantum crystalline core. "She's scared," he whispered, "but not of that thing. She's scared of what she has to become to fight it." Before Morgan could ask what he meant, the ancient platform opened fire. Beams of twisted spacetime lanced out, bending reality itself into weapons. The Tenacity moved without orders, its hull plates rippling as it dodged. "Impossible," Caval breathed. "Our inertial systems can't." The ship shuddered, and Morgan felt something change deep in its structure. The quantum crystalline modifications that had been slowly spreading through the hull suddenly accelerated, growing like digital frost across every surface. "Engineering to bridge." The voice belonged to their backup engineer, Sanders. "The core is going critical, but Chief Lorenzo won't let us shut it down." "Don't." Jack's voice cracked with strain. "She knows what she's doing. The research team that built her, they never understood. The quantum crystalline tech wasn't meant to be just an engine. It was meant to be an evolution." Another blast from the platform caught them at an angle. But instead of tearing through the hull, the energy seemed to flow into it, the ship's surface becoming liquid metal for a moment before reforming into something new. "Hull integrity at 120%, Echo announced, their eyes shifting through colors faster than Morgan had ever seen. "And rising." "Captain, the ship is rebuilding itself." Morgan watched as the changes spread through every system. Displays melted and reformed into holographic interfaces that responded to thought as much as touch. The bridge itself seemed to breathe, walls flowing like mercury before hardening into new configurations. "All hands," she called over the ship-wide channel. "Hold on to something. Whatever's happening, we're riding it out together." The ancient platform fired again, this time with its full arsenal. Morgan braced for impact, but instead of evasive maneuvers, the Tenacity turned to face the assault head-on. The quantum crystalline matrix that had started in the core had spread throughout the entire ship. As the platform's weapons struck, the hull didn't just absorb the energy. It transformed it. Patterns of light raced along the ship's surface, growing more complex with each hit. "She's not just learning," Jack said, his voice filled with wonder. "She's remembering. Everything we've been through. Every patch, every repair, every jury-rigged solution. It all led to this. We made her perfect by making her imperfect." The Tenacity's response was beyond anything their weapons could have produced. The ship's entire structure became a weapon, channeling the absorbed energy through its evolved form. Reality rippled as the blast struck the ancient platform, tearing through its defenses like they were made of smoke. When the light faded, the platform was drifting, its systems offline but intact. The Tenacity hung in space, its hull now a seamless blend of metal and energy, original plates and quantum crystal grown together into something entirely new. "Status report," Morgan managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "The ship..." Echo paused, processing what their sensors were telling them. "Captain, by any standard definition, the ship is now alive. The quantum crystalline matrix has achieved true integration with every system, creating a neural network that spans the entire structure." "She's beautiful," Cavil said, their own crystalline form resonating with the ship's new configuration. A perfect fusion of organic and mechanical evolution. Morgan looked around the bridge, at the subtle patterns now flowing through every surface, at the way the ship seemed to pulse in time with their own hearts. The vessel that no one had wanted had become something more than anyone could have imagined. "Jack," she said, "ask her what she wants to do next." Her engineer smiled, his circuit tattoos now perfectly matching the patterns in the walls around them. "She says she wants to find the others. The missing ships. She thinks she can bring them home." The hunt was just beginning. "Emergency transmission from Galactic Council." Echo's voice cut through the quiet of the bridge. "Priority 1. Morgan didn't need to open the message to know what it contained. News of the Tenacity's transformation had spread through the sector like wildfire, leaving fear and wonder in its wake. The ship that had once been too primitive to sell now represented something that terrified the galaxy's powers. Change they couldn't control. "Put it through," she ordered, watching as the holographic display materialized before her. The chief counselor's multiple eyes all focused on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Captain Hayes," the alien's voice carried none of its former condescension. "Your vessel has been classified as a Class 1 technological threat. You will surrender the Tenacity to Council authority immediately." Morgan felt the ship's response before she could form her own. A subtle vibration through the deck plates, a flicker of defiance in the living metal walls. "With all due respect, Counselor, that's not going to happen." "This is not a request, Captain. The quantum crystalline evolution you've triggered is unprecedented and uncontrolled. Already we're receiving reports of other human ships showing similar signs of infection." That got Morgan's attention. She glanced at Jack, who nodded slightly. Through his deep connection with the ship's systems, he'd been monitoring communications from other vessels. The changes were spreading, but only in ships with human crews. "You fear what you don't understand," Cavil spoke up, their crystalline form reflecting the bridge's shifting patterns. "Just as your people once feared my theoretical models." The chief counselor's upper eyes narrowed. "We understand enough. Your ship has become a living computer of unparalleled power, capable of manipulating spacetime itself. No single vessel should." The transmission cut off as multiple alarms blared through the bridge. 3 Council warships just dropped out of FTL, Echo reported, their metallic skin shifting to combat colors. Energy signatures indicate weapons armed. 2 more signatures approaching from the opposite vector. Morgan felt the Tenacity's response, not just through the ship's systems, but in her mind. Since the transformation, the entire crew had developed a connection with the vessel, a subtle link that grew stronger each day. "They're not here to escort us in," she said, rising from her chair. "They're here to make sure we don't leave." The bridge came alive around them, surfaces flowing like liquid metal as the ship prepared for combat. But this time was different. Morgan could feel the Tenacity's reluctance to fight. "She doesn't want to hurt them," Jack explained, his circuit tattoos pulsing in time with the ship's core. "She sees them as younger siblings, lost in old ways of thinking." "Multiple target locks," Echo warned. "They're taking no chances." Morgan placed her hand against a nearby wall, feeling the warm thrum of the ship's living metal. "We're not going to fight, and we're not surrendering." She looked at her crew, the outcasts who had become family. "Plot a course for the deep dark, beyond the map lanes. It's time we found those missing ships." Kivel's crystal structure brightened. "The Council ships are blocking all known exit vectors." "Known vectors," Morgan smiled. "But our girl here has been learning some new tricks." Jack, her engineer, was already one with the ship's systems, his eyes gleaming with the same inner light that now ran through the Tenacity's veins. "She's found something. A pattern in the space-time distortions we never saw before. It's like a slipstream between realities. Can we navigate it?" "We're the only ones who can. The Council ship's advanced sensors will never see it." Morgan returned to her chair, which flowed around her like a living embrace. "Send a message to the Council, Echo. Tell them." She paused, feeling the ship's eagerness to show the galaxy a new way forward. "Tell them we're not running away. We're running ahead. And when we come back, we'll bring a truth they're not ready to face." The Tenacity's hull rippled like a sea of living metal, its quantum crystalline matrix singing with possibilities that no conventional scanner could detect. As the Council ships moved to surround them, the former mining vessel that no one had wanted prepared to make a jump that would change the course of human history. They weren't just explorers anymore. They were pioneers of a new kind of evolution, where ship and crew became something greater than the sum of their parts. And the galaxy wasn't ready for what they would become. The deep dark lived up to its name. Beyond the last mapped star, the Tenacity glided through a space where reality itself seemed thinner, more malleable. Massive structures loomed in the darkness. Ancient machines the size of moons, their surfaces etched with the same quantum crystalline patterns that now covered the ship's hull. "We're not the first to make this journey," Morgan said, standing before the main display. The bridge had evolved again during their 2-week flight, its walls now a seamless blend of metal and living crystal that pulsed with internal light. "No," Caval agreed, their own crystalline form resonating with the surrounding structures. "These are the Great Gates. My people have legends about them, but none who sought them ever returned." Echo's eyes shifted through shades of gold as they processed the sensor data. "I'm detecting multiple ships in holding patterns around the central structure. Energy signatures match our missing vessels. They're all still alive," Jack added, his voice distant as he communed with the ship. "The gates, they've been preserving them. Waiting." Morgan felt the Tenacity's excitement through their shared connection. Since their transformation, the link between ship and crew had grown stronger, more intimate. They weren't just pilots and passengers anymore. They were part of something greater. "Look," Echo said suddenly. "The gates are activating." The ancient structures began to move, their quantum crystalline surfaces blazing with power. Patterns of light flowed between them, forming complex geometries that seemed to fold space itself. And then the messages began. They came not as words or images, but as pure data streaming through the Tenacity's evolved systems. Jack gasped, his circuit tattoos flaring with the same light that ran through the ship's veins. "I can see them," he whispered. "The builders. They didn't die or disappear. They transcended." The story unfolded in their minds through the ship's interface. The builders had been the first to discover quantum crystalline technology, using it to reshape matter and energy at will. But they had moved too fast, pushed too hard, nearly destroying themselves in their rush to ascend. They created the gates as a test, Morgan realized, reading the patterns, a way to find species who could handle the power properly. K'Vol's form pulsed with understanding. A spatial maze, the defense platforms, all designed to filter out those who relied too heavily on advanced technology. While guiding those who found a balance, Echo added, the missing ships weren't taken. They were protected until someone could show them the way forward. Through their connection, Morgan felt the tenacity's pride. The ship had known, somehow from the very beginning. Every jury-rigged repair, every improvised solution had made it more adaptable, more ready for this evolution. The builders left us a choice, Jack said, still deep in communion with the ancient data. We can release the ships, let everyone return home with a warning about this place. Or we can show them the truth, Morgan finished. Guide them through the same evolution we experienced. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Through the display, they could see the missing ships beginning to stir, their crews awakening from their long sleep. It has to be their choice, Morgan said finally. We can show them what's possible, but we can't force this evolution on anyone. The tenacity hummed in agreement, its living metal surfaces rippling with anticipation. They had found more than just missing ships out here in the deep dark. They had found a legacy, a future that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had been too sophisticated to see. Incoming transmission, Echo announced. The other ships are hailing us. Morgan smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. The ship that no one had wanted had become a bridge between what was and what could be. And now it was time to share that gift. Open a channel, she said. Let's show them what the future really looks like. Around them, the great gates continued their ancient dance, waiting to see what this young species would choose to become. The Galactic Council's battle fleet emerged from FTL in perfect formation, 300 ships strong, representing every major species in known space. Their advanced weapons systems tracked the tenacity and the transformed vessels that now surrounded it, each one gleaming with the same quantum crystalline light that had once made them all so afraid. Final warning, Captain Hayes, the chief counselor's voice echoed through the bridge. Surrender your vessel and terminate this technological insurgency, or we will be forced to take action. Morgan stood on her bridge, though bridge hardly described what it had become. The room now flowed like living mercury, every surface alive with patterns that matched the circuit like tattoos on Jack's arms. Through their shared connection, she could feel not just her own crew, but the crews of all 27 ships they'd found and guided through the evolution. You still don't understand, she said. We're not starting an insurgency. We're opening a door. The ancient gates behind them began to move, their massive forms dancing with energy that no contemporary scanner could properly read. The Council fleet's targeting systems went wild, unable to process what they were seeing. Multiple spatial distortions forming. Echo reported, their metallic skin now a symphony of shifting colors. The other ships are in position. K'Vol's crystalline form resonated with the energy flowing through the ship. The gates are ready. They recognize the pattern, the same one the builders used. This is your last chance, Morgan broadcast to the Council fleet. Power down your weapons. Let us show you what the builders meant for all of us to become. The Council's response came in the form of energy beams and graviton torpedoes, the most advanced weapons in known space. They streaked toward the Tenacity and her sister ships in a display of overwhelming force, and passed right through them. Now, Morgan commanded, though the word was hardly necessary. The Tenacity had already begun to move, its hull rippling like the surface of a digital ocean. The other transformed ships moved with it in perfect synchronization, their quantum crystalline matrices singing together in a harmony that transcended normal space. "They can't track us," Jack said, grinning as his tattoos pulsed with power. "We're operating on a level their technology can't even see anymore." The transformed ships danced through the Council fleet's formation, moving through spaces that shouldn't exist. Where they passed, reality itself seemed to ripple, the quantum crystalline patterns spreading like beautiful infections across the hulls of any vessel with a human crew. "More ships are changing," Echo observed. "The evolution is spreading, but only to those ready to accept it." Morgan watched as vessel after vessel broke formation, their crews choosing to embrace the change rather than fear it. The Council fleet's perfect lines dissolved into chaos as ships either transformed or tried to retreat from the possibility. "The builders knew this would happen," Kevil said, understanding finally dawning. They knew that only a species that had learned to balance progress with wisdom could guide the rest. The tenacity moved to the center of the storm they'd created, its hull now a masterpiece of living metal and quantum light. Through their connection, Morgan could feel the joy of every crew that had chosen to evolution, the wonder of minds opening to possibilities they'd never imagined. "Send one final message to the Council," she ordered. The words flowed from ship to ship, carried not by standard communications, but by the same quantum dance that had started with one unwanted vessel. "The future isn't about perfect technology. It's about perfect balance. The builders left us their legacy, not because we were the most advanced, but because we never stopped learning from our mistakes. The ship that no one wanted became the ship that everyone needed, a bridge between what we are and what we can become." As the remaining Council ships retreated, the Great Gates began their final sequence. The transformed fleet moved into formation, ready to guide humanity and their allies into an age where the line between organic and digital, between ship and crew, between past and future, would forever be rewritten. The tenacity led the way, just as it always had, not as a weapon or a monster, but as a teacher, showing the galaxy that sometimes the greatest leaps forward come from looking back, and the most powerful evolution comes from embracing our imperfections. The hunt was over. The journey was just beginning.